What if the people who raised you turned their backs on your child? Just to throw a party? Yeah, that's how I learned blood isn't family. It's just biology. My name's Jake. I used to think I had a decent grasp on life. I ran a small interior design business in San Antonio, Texas. Nothing flashy, just clean, functional spaces for regular folks. My wife, Megan, taught second grade, and our daughter, Lila, she was our little lightning bolt. Smart, weird, absolutely obsessed with dinosaurs. She once corrected a museum guide who mislabeled a hadrosaur. She was 4. Pepe. We weren't rich, but we were happy. No vacations in Italy or cars that parked themselves, but our fridge was full and Lila's laugh filled the apartment. That used to be enough. Until she got sick. It started as a cough. No big deal. We figured allergies. But then she stopped running, stopped jumping, started sleeping through the afternoons and picking at her food. One night she collapsed mid-play, wheezing like she was trying to breathe through a straw. Megan and I rushed her to the ER. I still remember the way the doctor looked at us after the CT scan. Like he'd seen this before, and he hated what he was about to say. There's a growth in her lung. It's compressing her airway. We need to operate as soon as possible. He said as soon as possible, like it meant right now, and then he dropped the second bomb. The surgery would cost $132,000 upfront, and we had no insurance. We'd gambled. I was self-employed, Megan's coverage didn't include dependents, and we'd convinced ourselves we were young, healthy, and had time. Turns out, we were WTOMG, and now my daughter was the one paying for that mistake. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I turned to my parents. Now, some background. My folks, Frank and Diane, ran a high-end home decor store. Big custom couches, chandeliers the size of hot tubs, stuff designed to impress. They weren't billionaires, but they loved to act like it. Their whole life revolved around image. Success wasn't about happiness, it was about how expensive your dinnerware looked on Instagram. And Brandon, my younger brother, fit right into that world. Ivy League degree, expensive cologne, a fiancé named after a French wine. Meanwhile, I was the older brother, with paint on his jeans and a mortgage. Growing up, the favoritism wasn't subtle. Brandon got applause for a B-. I got silence for straight A's. When I started my own business, they said nothing. When Brandon got hired at a marketing firm, they threw him a party. Still, they were Lila's grandparents. I thought maybe, that counted for something. I drove to their place straight from the hospital. I was still in the hoodie I'd slept in the night before. My eyes were red, but not from tears. I was running on fear and 3 cups of vending machine coffee. When they opened the door, the music hit me first. Live jazz. People in cocktail dresses and suits filled the house. Champagne flowing. Laughter echoing off the marble floors. Farah Maghedi. It was Brandon's engagement party. I stood there in the middle of the crowd, out of breath, out of place, and about 2 heartbeats away from losing it. I finally found my mom between hors d'oeuvre and introductions, and I said the words I never thought I'd have to say. Lila's in the hospital. She needs surgery. We need help. She blinked at me like I'd just told her it might rain tomorrow. No shock, no concern. Just a wrinkle between her brows and a glance over my shoulder at the party. Now's really not the best time, Jake. We've been planning this for months. I stood there, stunned. And then my dad joined in, cool as ever. We've already spent over $250,000 on this wedding, he said. We can't just throw that away. I stared at them, my parents, the people who raised me, the ones who used to call Lila their little sunshine. I waited for them to crack, to say they were joking, to offer anything. But they didn't. Not $1. Not one question about her. Penshine. I left that house without looking back. Penshine. That night, I sat in my car and cried like I hadn't since I was a kid. But I didn't cry because they said no. I cried because I'd finally accepted the truth. They were never going to be my safety net. And they definitely weren't Lila's. You ever walk away from something so surreal that your brain doesn't even process it until your feet stop moving? That was me. Outside my parents' house, the jazz music still echoing faintly behind me while my daughter fought for her life across town. I remember standing under the porch light, rain starting to come down in fat, lazy drops, just trying to make sense of it. They didn't ask how she was. They didn't offer to talk later. Nothing. It was like I'd interrupted a movie they were too invested in to pause. Brandon had been there too, of course. My brother, my childhood sidekick turned suit-wearing stranger. I caught his eye before I left. He gave me this half-shrug like, "What do you want me to do, man?" The pata dumb or I wanted to punch him. But Lila didn't need me behind bars. She needed me in her corner. I drove straight back to the hospital, heart pounding the whole way. Megan was pacing the hallway when I arrived, her eyes bloodshot but alert. Her parents had come, she said. They were sitting with Lila while the doctors monitored her breathing. Just hearing that gave me enough strength to walk through those double doors. I wish I could tell you I had a plan. I didn't. I was just a dad with an empty bank account and a kid whose lungs were collapsing. But in that moment, I made a promise to myself. If no one else was going to save her, I would. The next morning, we sat down with Megan's parents in the cafeteria. Cheap coffee, vending machine muffins, and more love than I'd ever gotten at my childhood dinner table. Her mom, Linda, didn't say much, just held my hand across the table. Her dad, Tom, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Tell us what you need." I hesitated. It felt shameful to even say the number. "We're still short, about $90,000. He nodded slowly, like he was doing the math in real time. "We'll figure it out." By the end of the week, I had sold my car, drained our savings, and taken out a personal loan I wasn't even sure I'd be able to repay. I went to every friend, every coworker, every half-acquaintance who might even think about helping. I swallowed my pride and asked. Some gave $50, some gave $5,000. One guy the first hadn't talked to since college sent me a Venmo with a note that said, "I got your back, man, always." But it wasn't enough. I still needed $45,000. And I was out of lifelines. Then Tom called me. "Come by the house," he said. I showed up expecting another heart-to-heart, or maybe a brainstorm session. Instead, he handed me a check. $40,000 even. I froze. "Tom, how?" He gave me a small, tired smile. "We sold the house. Got a decent price. We're moving into a rental across town." I couldn't speak. My in-laws, two people not bound to me by blood, had sold their home to save Lila. Meanwhile, my own parents were probably sipping champagne under a chandelier that cost more than her hospital bill. That kind of love? That stays with you. It reshapes your soul. The hospital cleared the payment the next morning. Lila was in surgery by noon. Megan and I sat in that sterile waiting room, holding hands so tight it hurt. When the doctor finally came out and said the words, "It went well," I didn't cry. I collapsed. Every muscle in my body gave out at once, not from sadness, just from holding it together for too long. Lila spent a week in recovery. Every day, she got a little St. Tomger. Her voice came back. Her laugh returned. The sparkle in her eyes? Brighter than ever. One afternoon, as I wheeled her around the hospital garden, she looked up at me and said, "Daddy, when I get better, I want to run faster than a dinosaur." I smiled and said, "Sweetheart, you already did." Lila came home 2 weeks after the surgery. Weak, but smiling. She still had a bandage on her side and a soft rasp in her breath, but she was alive. That's all that mattered. Her little dinosaur pajamas hung off her shoulders a bit more loosely than before, but she held on to her T-Rex plush like it had saved her too. The apartment was quiet that first night back. Not peaceful quiet, just empty. We'd sold so much to make the surgery happen. Our couch? Gone. The dining table? Replaced with a fold-out card table. My beloved camera collection, Megan's bookshelf, even Lila's play kitchen, all sold off, piece by piece. The space echoed with sacrifice. But even with everything we'd lost, I couldn't stop staring at her, curled up in her bed, her chest rising and falling. And every rise was a small, defiant victory. Still, something in me wouldn't settle. Oi. Gratitude and rage battled it out in my chest. I was thankful to have my daughter back. Thankful for Megan's parents, who had sold their home without hesitation. Thankful for friends who chipped in, even when they didn't have much to give. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw the inside of that party again. The champagne glasses. The laughter. My parents' blank stares. My brother's smug shrug. That memory had claws, so I made a quiet vow. I was going to rebuild my life, and not just to survive. I wanted to thrive. I wanted to make something undeniable. I didn't want revenge. I wanted proof, for every person who had shown me love when they didn't have to. For my daughter. For myself. And yeah, maybe a small part of me wanted my parents to choke on the headlines when they saw what I'd become. I poured everything into Revive Design. At first, it was just me and a notebook, sketching ideas between Lila's naps and doctor visits. Then came the real hustle. I started taking every job that came my way. Tiny home offices, awkward bathroom remodels, even a frozen yogurt shop where the owner paid me half in store credit. I didn't care. I just needed traction. I worked 16-hour days, woke up before the sun, slept with my laptop on my chest, ate fast food in my car while watching online tutorials on interior lighting design. If someone needed a room refreshed or a storefront overhauled, I was there. Rain, shine, holiday. I showed up. Every single time. And slowly, it started to matter. One client told another. A cafe I redid got featured on a local foodie blog. A photo of my custom bench design ended up on Pinterest. People started calling me. Actual clients. With real budgets. A year after Lila's surgery, I landed a mid-size hotel project. Not huge, but big enough to get noticed, and big enough to wipe out our debt. I'll never forget walking into the bank, check in hand, and paying off the final balance from the hospital. The teller smiled and said, "That's a big one," and I just nodded, too choked up to explain that I wasn't just paying a bill, I was closing a chapter I never wanted to reread. From there, things snowballed. I hired a part-time assistant, then a junior designer, then a contractor I'd met on a job site who used to call me the guy with the tired eyes. We moved out of our tiny office into a real studio downtown. I got business cards, a real website, a logo that didn't look like it was made in a free trial version of Canva. By year 3, Revive Design was being invited to bid on corporate campuses, boutique condos, high-end restaurants. I wasn't chasing work anymore, it was chasing me. But I didn't forget where I started. I kept a photo of Lila in the hospital on my desk, not because I wanted to relive the pain, but because it reminded me why I was here, why I couldn't take any of it for granted. Every win, every client, every dollar earned. It all traced back to that little girl fighting to breathe, and the people who stepped in when blood walked out. Then came the interview. Tarak. A business magazine wanted to feature me in a piece about small firms making big waves. I was hesitant. I'd never been the type to chase attention. But something inside me said, "Tell the story. All of it." So I did. Hans Rita. I talked about Lila, Han Kayao, the diagnosis, the surgery, the money. I talked about how strangers and in-laws came through. And I talked about how the people I expected to care, the ones who were supposed to, turned their backs. Cold. Without hesitation. Jens runs once prouder than he's. I didn't name names. But I didn't need to. Jens runs. Anyone who knew me well could read between the lines. And the people it was really about? Oh, they'd know exactly who they were. And I was just getting started. The article dropped on a Thursday. The headline was simple. From ruin to revive. How a single dad turned rock bottom into a design empire. The journalist had done her homework. She wove the story together with clean detail. How I'd built Revive Design from a folding table in a Craigslist ad, how I'd clawed my way out of medical debt, and how it all started with a moment of betrayal. I hadn't expected it to take off. Thought maybe a few locals would read it, a couple of new clients would show up, and life would roll on more. But that article caught fire. Turns out people love a good redemption arc, especially when it's honest. Emails started coming in. Strangers telling me their own stories, about families that turned their backs, about miracles that came from unexpected places. I got invitations to speak at small business panels, conferences, even a virtual TED-style talk. One message simply said, "Your story made me stop feeling ashamed for being cut off by my family. Thank you." I didn't realize how many people were carrying stories like mine. How many were told they were selfish for needing help. How many had to beg for compassion and got nothing but cold shoulders in return, a burl. But not everyone liked the spotlight. Qualite. My parents saw the article. I know because 2 days later, a mutual connection told me my dad had been pulled aside at a trade show. "Is it true?" the guy had asked. "Did you really turn your back on your granddaughter's surgery for a wedding?" Apparently my father turned red and walked away without answering. Good. I didn't name them in the interview. I hadn't said Frank and Diane Walker. I hadn't even mentioned Brandon. But the timeline, the story, it was clear enough for anyone who knew us. The internet did the rest. A week after the article dropped, I got a text from an old classmate. Just a screenshot. It was a post from Brandon's fiancée, now wife, on Instagram. Caption: "Don't believe everything you read. Some people love to play victim." Comments were turned off. That alone said enough. But I didn't respond, didn't message, didn't defend myself. Because I didn't have to. Because I didn't have to. The truth doesn't need a PR team. It just needs oxygen. And the truth was starting to mess with their lives. Word spread fast in our community. The luxury furniture store my parents had built their lives around started losing longtime clients. A major real estate firm pulled out of a deal, citing, quote, reputational concerns. Even their weekend social circle, those wine-sipping country club friends, began to cool off. Nobody wants to be associated with the villains in a story that's gone viral. And Brandon? His career had always been boosted by connections, my parents' clients, their referrals, their carefully curated image. But when that image cracked, so did the opportunities. Clients ghosted him, collaborators stopped replying. And Cassidy, his picture-perfect wife, well, she wasn't a fan of being publicly linked to the uncle who let his niece suffer. One morning, Megan found a headline on her phone. Designer dad's comeback story exposes chilling family betrayal. Below it, people were sharing quotes from my interview. I asked for help to save my daughter. They said they'd already spent it all on a party. Brutal. And true. I didn't post any of it, didn't retweet. I just watched from the sidelines as the same people who had once stood tall on their status started scrambling to control a narrative that no longer belonged to them. And still, I kept working. I poured more energy into Revive than ever before. Not to stay relevant, but because now I had momentum. I wasn't climbing anymore. I was flying. We landed a 7-figure contract with a national hotel chain. Our staff doubled. I brought in a creative director and a business manager. Megan quit teaching and started managing our family's charitable outreach program, something we built to help other families struggling with medical costs. We named it Lila's Ladder, because no one should have to kneel to be seen. Through all of it, my in-laws stayed humble. They never asked for recognition, never bragged about what they gave up. But I didn't forget. I was already working on a plan to repay them, piece by piece. Elity. And my parents? They stayed quiet. For now. But I could feel it. That call was coming. They'd turned their backs when I was broken. Now I was the only lifeline they had left. You ever watch a house collapse in slow motion? Not from one big explosion, but from years of cracked foundations and hollow walls? That's what it looked like, watching my parents' empire fall apart piece by piece. After the article went viral and the whispers turned into headlines, things didn't just quiet down, they unraveled. Their furniture business, once the pride of their polished party-hosting lives, started bleeding clients. Longtime customers vanished, wholesalers backed out of contracts. I even heard one supplier demand to be paid uptopped for orders, citing, quote, unfavorable press. My dad nearly lost it over that one. Reputation had always been his currency, and now it was worthless. Then the partnerships dried up, sponsorships disappeared. Even the showroom traffic, the constant stream of high-heeled browsers and espresso-sipping decorators, slowed to a crawl. A place that used to be buzzing turned into an echo chamber with overpriced throw pillows. No chally. I didn't gloat. I didn't post snide comments or celebrate their downfall. I just watched. Quietly. The same way they'd watched me beg. But the story didn't end with business trouble. Brandon was next. I don't know exactly how it all played out, but Cassidy, his wife, wasn't built to withstand public scrutiny. Her friend circle was heavy on the social media influencers, and suddenly her Instagram comments were filled with questions like, "Is your husband really the guy from that story? And how does it feel knowing your niece almost died while you were planning your honeymoon?" At first she tried to fight it. Turned off comments. Blocked people. Even posted a filtered selfie with a caption that said, "Protecting your peace means letting go of toxic narratives. But you can't block the truth." Eventually, Cassidy contacted him. Brandon tried to explain, probably spun some tale about family misunderstandings, taken out of context. But lies fall apart faster when they're built on something rotten. Rize, one day I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was Cassidy. "I know we've never spoken, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I had no idea. What they did to you, to Lila. I couldn't stay married to someone who was okay with that." She left him 2 weeks later. Took the apartment, took the dog, left him with the wedding photos and a fast dissolving sense of dignity. Funny how the same brother who once looked down at me from across the party floor, cocktail in hand, was now the one standing alone. Meanwhile, my parents kept trying to act like it would all blow over. I heard they attempted to host a charity event a few months later. Big gala, local press, catered dinner. But half the guests backed out at the last minute. The other half showed up for the gossip. People love watching a slow-motion train wreck when it's dressed in a tuxedo. Then came the foreclosure notices. Turns out, their lavish life had been held together with debt and duct tape. The business was their anchor, and when that went under, the mortgage came calling. Their bank accounts were frozen, their credit lines maxed. The country club friends stopped answering texts. It was poetic, really. They'd once spent $250,000 on Brandon's wedding without blinking. And now, they couldn't scrape together enough to keep their house. And me? I was thriving. Revive Design was booked 6 months out. We had contracts in 3 cities. Megan and I had just closed on a new home with a backyard big enough for Lila to plant a garden. She'd already named one of the trees Dino Twig. I didn't ask. More than anything, though, we had peace. No debts hanging over our heads, no tension at family dinners, just quiet, steady joy. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me still waiting, a part of me that knew something was coming, a call, a message, a knock at the door. Jorah. Because when people lose everything, they always circle back to the bridges they burned, hoping the smoke is cleared. And sure enough, one afternoon, while I was reviewing site plans in my office, my phone buzzed. Hey. Unknown number. Hey. I almost ignored it. But something in my gut told me to answer. Hey. Jake, the voice said, hesitant, familiar. It's Mom. There was a silence thick enough to choke on. Then she spoke again, soft, shaking. We need your help. I leaned back in my chair, stared at the ceiling, and felt a strange mix of nothing and everything all at once. Here it was. The moment they'd never imagined would come. And the only question left now was how I would answer. Jake, we need your help. It was my mother's voice, but not the one I remembered. This one was thinner, tired, touched by something I never thought I'd hear from her. Regret. I didn't say anything. She rushed to fill the silence. We mortgaged the house. Tried covering debts after the business fell apart. But the bank's moving in. We need $150,000 or we'll lose everything. Everything. The same everything they chose over Lila. I leaned back, staring at the photo of Lila taped to my monitor, post-surgery, with a gap-toothed grin and a paper tiara. Mom, I said, steady. Do you remember the night I came to you? Silence. I stood there, told you Lila needed emergency surgery. You said it wasn't the right time. Dad told me to stop making a scene. Brandon smirked. She choked on her words. We were WTOMG. Please, Jake. You didn't just say no, you didn't say anything. Not a single question about her. Just nothing. More silence. Then came the fallback. But we're still family. I let out a dry, joyless laugh. No family shows up. Family doesn't step over their son on the floor to keep refilling wine glasses. I hung up without another word. That night, I told Megan. I expected her to say what I was already thinking, that we owed them nothing. Instead, she looked at me and said, "Do you want to help them?" "No," I replied without hesitation. "Then don't do it for them. Do it so you don't carry it later. It's stuck." Even though I didn't want it to. So I went to Tom and Linda, my in-laws, my actual family. Tom listened, then said, "Helping someone who abandoned you doesn't make you weak, it proves they didn't break you." I stood on the balcony that night, city lights glowing in the dark. Thought about Lila and what kind of man I wanted to be when she got old enough to ask the hard questions. Next morning, I called Chris, a friend in finance. Check on my parents, is it real? 3 hours later, I had my answer. It was. They were done. No savings, no fallback, no miracle coming. So I called Mom back. "I'll help," I said. "But you and Dad have to come to my office, in person." They did. They looked smaller, older. No confidence. No gloss. Just 2 people trying to pretend this wasn't humiliating. My office. They sat across from me in the company I'd built without them. I placed a black suitcase on the desk, unlatched it, and pushed it toward them. $150,000 in cash. They gasped. My dad reached for it like it might vanish. Before he could grab it, I spoke. This is the last thing you'll get from me. After today, we're done. You chose your legacy. I chose mine. My mom's mouth opened, but no words came. Security opened the door. They left with the money, and they left without me. I thought I'd feel something when they left. Relief. Satisfaction. Maybe even a sense of justice. But, as I watched the door close behind my parents, $150,000 heavier and still somehow hollow, I didn't feel anything at all. No rush of victory. No deep breath of closure. Just quiet. And maybe that was enough. I went back to work that afternoon like it was any other day. Emails, site inspections, mood boards. The hum of progress wrapped around me like armor. Because life keeps moving, whether or not you get your big cinematic moment. Manius. But later that night, after Lila had gone to bed and Megan had dozed off with a book on her chest, I sat in the living room and let myself remember. Nas Gasada. The begging. The silence. The party. The empty driveway I'd walk back to while my daughter lay in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. Then I thought about now, about the life we'd built. The people who had stepped in when the world stepped out. Tom and Linda, who gave up their home without a second thought. Friends and strangers who passed around envelopes, whispered encouragement, showed up. They didn't owe me anything. But they gave me everything. So I started giving back. I paid off debts for the employees who stayed by my side when I had nothing but unpaid invoices and duct-taped office chairs. I reached out to old friends who had helped, offering business investments, home repairs, even anonymous college funds. Most of them said the same thing, "You don't have to do this." I just smiled and said, "I know." Then I bought Tom and Linda's house back, tracked down the new owners, negotiated quietly, and handed them the keys one Sunday morning. Linda cried. Tom said nothing at first, just hugged me longer than he ever had before. Then he nodded once and said, "Told you you'd come through." We had them move in with us soon after. Not because they needed help, but because we wanted them there. Lila was thrilled. "Wait, Grandma and Grandpa are gonna live with us forever?" she asked. "Forever," I said. She grinned. "Cool, now they can come to every tea party." I didn't cry, Heberjoel, but I might have choked up a little. Rye. As for my parents, they haven't called since. Maybe they got the message. Maybe they're waiting for the dust to settle. Maybe they still don't understand what they lost, that blast. That I do. That blast. I lost a version of myself that believed family was something owed to you by blood. What I found instead was something deeper. Chosen family. Built. Not born. Lila's doing amazing now. She's St. Tomger, louder, sharper than ever. She climbs trees, argues about dinosaur facts, and tells anyone who'll listen that her daddy is a room boss, which I'm pretty sure means interior designer in 8-year-old speak. Megan's pregnant again. We found out a few weeks ago. And when we told Lila she was going to be a big sister, she squealed so loud the neighbors probably assumed we'd won the lottery. And honestly, we kinda did. We're in a new house now. Big backyard. Light-filled kitchen. A real home, built on second chances and the kind of love that doesn't flinch when things get hard. Sometimes I still think about that party. The tuxedos. The indifference. The laughter that sounded like static in my ears as I begged. Kurelim. And yeah, sometimes I wonder if they ever replay it in their heads. If Brandon ever regrets stepping back. If my parents lie awake in that house, holding onto the money more tightly than each other. But I don't need answers. I got the only one that ever mattered. Mel. Lila's alive. We're whole. And we're free. Closure isn't always a door slamming shut. Sometimes it's just choosing to walk through a better one and never looking back.